I have a big question for you.
Yeah.
Recently, Elon Musk said that you are not the right person to run Reform. What do you answer?
You know, Musk is a political radical. You know, he genuinely is quite a big political radical.
What do you mean by radical, political radical?
Oh, I mean, he's out-trumping Trump. I want no truck with the extreme racist elements that exist within politics. And, you know, both sides have extremes, and we know that.
A lot of people think that you are racist as well.
Well, that's...
Yesterday, I was in a taxi and I was saying, what do you think about Nigel Farage? He said, I hate him, he's racist.
You know, you are a great advocate with what you do of free speech, as am I, in my own way. But there are limits, you know, acceptable, reasonable limits. But no, it's an exciting work.
On this topic, I think we're seeing a good change with Mark Zuckerberg coming in and all this stuff. But in the United States, they give examples on where interference was with social media. But in Europe, I don't know how they influence and interfere. Zuckerberg said that it's much worse in Europe.
The European Union is a huge historical mistake of epic proportions.
UK left the European Union, but it seems that it's not going better.
That's true. That's true.
You have on your shoulder, when you sleep, that you let UK out of the EU. Are you confident that this was the right?
Have a look out there. Do you know what you see? A free country. Unlike the enslaved Greeks and others, we are free to mess up our own lives.
First of all, just to say, I love the European Union. I am from Cyprus. Cyprus is a very small country, and I think Cyprus is benefiting a lot from being in the European Union.
You're prepared to sell your freedom?
No, I'm just saying that for my country, I believe it's better to be inside a circle of 400 million people instead of...
Do you know the argument that being part of a bigger club is lazy?
Who are you?
Who are you? I've never heard of you. No one in Europe's ever heard of you. That was great fun. Who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. That was great fun. It was the background to that was that they were restructuring the EU, and the 6-month rotating presidency of the European Council, we were going to have a permanent president, and we were actually told that this person on the world stage would stop the traffic in Washington and Beijing. And Tony Blair was the favourite. Everyone thought Tony Blair would get the job. And they chose a bloke called Herman Van Rompuy. Well, I mean, most people in Belgium had never heard of him, and he'd briefly been their prime minister. So it was just, the whole thing was farcical. I mean, it was all dressed up as if it was almost like a coronation. And this scruffy little bloke walked in, you know, and I just couldn't resist it. But it really summed up the whole European project, generally run by political pygmies who've failed in domestic politics and then get shunted upstairs to the European Union. And of course, nobody of any importance is voted for. You're voted for as an MEP, as I was 5 times, but we don't count. The real power is with people who are appointed, not elected, which was one of my fundamental objections to it. But look, I mean, I used the position in the European Parliament. I was elected in 1999. I mean,
crazy.
Makes me sound ancient. I was quite young.
How old it was? It was your first time getting an office position?
Oh, yeah. I just turned 35 when I first went to Brussels and Strasbourg. And the first few years were difficult. You know, there were 3 of us from UKIP elected to the European Parliament. And we were the...
From your party, 3 of you?
Yes. I mean, but literally, we were the only people in the building who thought Britain should leave the EU. Or that, you know, there were Eurosceptics who said, look, we should reform this and change this and amend that. But we were the sort of 3 heretics in the temple. It's very funny. First day, we arrived in Brussels and sort of, hello, and sort of, who are you? They asked us, who are you? And of course, we had no staff, we had no secretaries. I mean, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. But the first plenary session in Strasbourg, so that would be July 99, and we've given our offices, and the phone rang. And it was the British ambassador to the European Union requesting a meeting. So in he came, very grave-faced. And him and two officials sat on one side of the desk, and the three of us sat on the other. And he said, "Gentlemen, what are your intentions?" I said, "Well, hang on. We're not terrorists. I mean, they literally thought we were the wild men from the hills for daring to have this opinion." So it was, the early years there were, we couldn't make much impact. We genuinely couldn't make much impact. You might get 90 seconds to speak at 11:20 at night, or whatever it was. And I guess, to be fair, we weren't very big. And then something remarkable happened. There was an invention. And in about 2007, would be about then, I first heard the words YouTube. I'd never heard of it. And suddenly in 2008, the financial crisis begins to appear on the horizon. And I gave a speech in the Parliament when I said, if anybody today is looking at the bond spread differentials between German and Greek bonds, not, of course, I said, that any of you will understand what I'm talking about. But I basically was saying, look, there are some markers here. There are some signals that something's wrong. Anyway, I give this speech. And within an hour or two, my phone's ringing. People I used to work with when I worked in commodity markets and financial markets. People say, "Wow, that speech." I said, "What do you mean?" I mean, no one's ever seen a speech of mine in the European Parliament. It's never been on British television. I mean, I'm sort of hidden across the channel. And it was an American financial markets website that had picked it up. And Zero Hedge, I mean, they're now the biggest financial markets website in the world. And Zero Hedge had picked up from the European Parliament feed what I'd said, and had banged it out to their subscribers on YouTube. I thought, oh, this is interesting. Wow. So I began to realize that once a month, and by then, I was a joint group leader. So by then, I was getting more speaking time, more prominent positions. And I began to realize that actually, if I was able to do something that was impactful in terms of being interesting factually, but also fun. And suddenly, some of those big speeches that I gave, millions and millions and millions were watching. And it kind of...
So the impact was a lot bigger in social media than in the Parliament.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I realized this and I remember in about 2009, Guy Verhofstadt, one of the prominent pro-EU fanatics. And Verhofstadt gave a speech in the European place. He said, and Farage, all he does is he stands here and speaks to his audience on YouTube. And I said, yeah. So had it not been for social media, had it not been for YouTube in particular, I would have disappeared without trace. It would have been a little blip in British political history. And that's what changed everything. And it turned UKIP into a major party, which led to a referendum,
Do you think you are responsible for the UK leaving the EU?
Oh, if I hadn't been there, there would never have been a referendum. And if there'd never been a referendum, we'd never have left. I mean, this is so typical of Western countries that what the capital cities, mainstream media, and the political class think is often very different to what their countries outside think. We hear this phrase, this sort of slightly academic phrase, democratic deficit. Well, it's blooming enormous in a lot of countries. And kind of the rise of Trump in America kind of shows you that. Trump appears, he walks down the elevator in Trump Tower, He becomes president. He's now staged the biggest political comeback we've ever seen. And most people in Washington hate him. I mean, absolutely hate him, or did. We're seeing a bit of a change with Mr. Zuckerberg and various others at the moment. But what did Trump do? Trump connected with Middle America on issues that they talk about when they're in the bar or, you know, having dinner at home or whatever it is. And I believe that Western politics is going into one of the biggest periods of change that we've seen for 100 years, probably. I think that's going to happen. I think it's beginning to happen all over Europe. And I think, but here's the problem.
I'm a proof, an example. I just got elected independent just with social media in my country, Cyprus.
Yes.
So with no help, just TikTok and all this stuff. So
which you're very
things
good
are
at.
changing. Things are changing. And so with all the elections.
And legacy media. You know, I mean, it's interesting. Until about 6 months ago, I still thought that mainstream traditional legacy media, even though the numbers that view it are lower, I still thought that in terms of setting the agenda, that's where the dominance was. I think the American election has just changed all of that. It's just changed all of that. And, you know, there are upsides and downsides to that. I mean, the upside is that it's fundamentally democratic.
And that we own our narrative for the first time. It's so refreshing.
Well, you see, I mean,
you don't need anybody else. You can create your own stuff.
Oh, I mean, the BBC. I mean, before I started to become a bit of a bigger deal.
You think you are a big deal?
Well, I know. I didn't say that. I did not say that. I was very careful with my choice of language. But before I was able to get round the back of the BBC, and don't forget, you know, this state broadcaster that we have here is massive. Radio, television, websites. I mean, they are enormous. They should be, because we have to pay a lot. We have to pay a lot of money for it every year, or go to prison. But that enabled me to get round the back. But up until that moment, whenever I occasionally was interviewed by the BBC, I mean, I was treated like a war criminal. I mean, you'd really think I'd done something terrible. So yeah, you know, social media is very democratic. Now, obviously, the difficult bit is that falsehoods can spread on social media. But then falsehoods could spread on mainstream media. So kind of what's the difference? As long as, and here's the important thing, as long as what's said on social media isn't insightful, because we all have to recognize, you know, you are a great advocate with what you do of free speech, as am I, in my own way. But there are limits, you know, acceptable, reasonable limits. But no, it's an exciting world. Yeah.
Now it seems information, like they were labeling all this disinformation and all this stuff. Where do you draw the line and all this stuff? Your disinformation is my information. It's But on this topic, I think we're seeing a good change with Mark Zuckerberg coming in and all this stuff. But I was very curious because they talk in the United States, and also Elon, the Twitter files, and Mark Zuckerberg, and they give examples on where interference was with the state, with the social media. But in Europe, I don't know how they influence and interfere. Zuckerberg said that it's much worse in Europe. So
I don't think that's true.
You don't think that's true?
No, not really. I mean, look, we're all free to choose whatever mechanisms we want. I mean, it's all well and good for Zuckerberg to tell us what we should think. I mean, crikey, this is the man. This is the man in 2020 and in the American presidential election. And then as lockdowns continued, this is the man where any criticism of establishment policy on vaccines, on lockdowns, on the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, if you made any of these comments on Facebook, you were suspended. I mean, he's been one of the worst of all of this.
Credit to him from coming out and saying...
Finally.
Finally.
But he has. No, I mean...
But he says that Europe is much worse. You don't think that
I don't think so.
Case?
Do you?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't really think so.
But there is a lot of fines, like billions of dollars fines.
Worse in that sense. Worse in that sense.
Worse in that of interference.
Sorry, I misunderstood you.
My English is very bad.
I thought you meant worse in terms of narrative. Oh, in terms of the power of the state, well, Europe's far worse, and there's a reason for that. Because in every other free country in the world, a government gets elected with an agenda. You can call it a manifesto, a contract, whatever you like. And then every 4 or 5 years, the public can judge, have they kept their promises? Have they done a good job? And we can kick them out and bring somebody else in with a completely different. And they can undo everything the previous government's done if they choose to do so. In Europe, you can't change law. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if every MEP was elected to change a piece of law. Say everyone agreed on a piece of law, and it could be on regulation of big tech, for argument's sake, versus free speech. Even if every MEP was elected on that ticket, it makes no difference.
Well, they could not vote for Ursula von der Leyen in the beginning and then reject everyone that they gave to them. But yeah, it's very hard for this
and this is the fundamental problem. So Zuckerberg, it's funny because I remember Zuckerberg coming to Brussels and the group leaders all met Zuckerberg, and I was one of them. And he was, he wasn't very pleased to meet me, I've got to tell you. And this is the problem with the system, isn't it? You know, that if the people that propose law or the amendment to law are effectively appointees and unelected, and you know, it's the European Commission that are the guardian of the treaties and of the acquis communautaire. It's very boring, but the acquis communautaire, then changing things is very, very difficult. Very, very difficult indeed. I think we are going to see attempts to regulate tech. It's going to happen here too, I suspect. But, you know, just given the way the world is now, you know, if you do regulate the big guys, then what will happen is small guys will pop up. And I don't think you can stop this now.
Especially with AI and all this stuff.
It literally can't be stopped. Whatever
Pandora's box open already.
Yeah, no, it is. And I, you know, they might make it tough for Zuckerberg and they might make it very tough for Mr. Musk because they don't like him very much.
At all. In the European Parliament, they hate him.
Oh, yeah, and here.
and here in the UK.
The Labour Party. You know. But yeah, you know, even if they get suppressed, other things will emerge. This is a pretty unstoppable force. And we have to hope that it's a force for good.
Well, we need to go back a bit to Europe and like you have on your shoulder when you sleep that you let UK out of the EU. Are you confident that this was the right?
Have a look out there. Do you know what you see?
Yeah, I see
a free country. Unlike the enslaved Greeks and others, we're a free country. We are free to mess up our own lives or to get it right. No. I mean, look, the European Union is a huge historical mistake of epic proportions. Epic proportions. It makes no sense at all. Why do we have it? Dead simple. Dead simple. You know, in 1870, Bismarck founds the German state, and the first thing they do is invade France. All right? Then they invade France again in 1914. And then they invade France again in 1940. And people in those generations thought this is too awful. Well, it was. This is too awful. We have to find the means of making the French and Germans come to peace. And that's why we had the coal and steel agreement, because actually, the more people trade with each other, the more people have exchange with each other. I was going to say intercourse, but that might get taken wrong. But the more, the more ties there are, the less chance there is of going to war.
Yes.
So the rationale, and basically, for the most part, good intentions of the project, you can understand why. But the problem was that it was a solution to a previous problem, not a solution for the 1950s or 60s or 70s or now.
But we have wars now. Come on.
We've got wars everywhere. Exactly. We've got wars everywhere. And so the idea there should be peace in Europe, admirable, obviously. But the Germans weren't going to invade for a fourth time. It was.
But you never know.
Oh, are the Germans that bad?
No, but like the Russians did it recently.
Yeah.
And it's more complicated. But
here's the problem.
Israel, Palestine.
Okay, here's the problem. We'll just stick with Europe for a second, right? The reason we have countries, and they have flags and anthems and football teams, is because whether we like it or not, mankind is basically tribal. We might live well and drive nice cars and eat good food, but we want to be part of something. It's important to us. Family is important to us. Community used to be important to us, a bit less so now. But country is still fundamentally important to most people. And you could only merge countries, which is what the European project intends to do, if you have the consent of people to do so. If you force people together without ever telling them the truth about what your intentions really are, then far from creating peace and harmony, what you actually create is disunity. What you actually create is anger, and quite possibly the very extreme nationalism that you sought to stop in the first place. And I would argue pretty strongly that people in Europe have not been told the truth ever. I mean, listen to Verhofstadt and you hear the truth. European army, European state, effectively the nation state disappears. It doesn't exist. Do the people of Europe want that? No. They clearly don't want that. And I think, and this is the big lesson from history, and we can talk about what's happening today. We can move on and talk about Gaza and talk about Ukraine and what happened in the Balkans in the 90s and etc. But whenever I used to go around universities a lot and schools a lot, and sadly, I don't do much of that anymore. I haven't got time. I've got a couple of schools, but I haven't got time. And here's the point I always make. When people argue in favour of global institutions, and by the way, I'm all for cooperation. I mean, I want a Europe where we can actually sit around the table and cooperate. I am pro-European in the sense of the diversity of the nation states of Europe. But here's the fact I always put to students who think I'm wrong. There is no single example in history of two mature, functioning democracies going to war with each other. The way to stop war isn't to artificially bring people together. The way to stop war is to make sure there are full functioning democracies. And the reason it works is you might hate the government that you've got, but if you've got a chance by putting a cross on a piece of paper of changing it, that's better, isn't it? Because if you don't have that chance, then violence becomes your alternative to get change. And it's nearly always, wars are nearly always where an undemocratic government or dictator wants to expand their territory. If you go back thousands of years, that's generally what happens. And the real check on that is a democratic structure. So that's, that's one of the fundamental beliefs that I've had for 25, 30 years. I think it's a really powerful and very important point.
I am from Cyprus. Cyprus is a very small country. And I think that we have 6 members of the European Parliament out of the 720. So I think Cyprus is benefiting a lot from being in the European Union with everything, all the benefits.
You're prepared to sell your freedom.
No, I'm just saying that for my country, I believe it's better to be inside
what's it?
A circle of 400 million people instead of.
So what's it done for? So has Northern Cyprus come back? Has it?
No.
No. There you go. There you go. So all well and good. You're the Greek cultural part, but it hasn't solved any problems with the North. And if you have a look at what happened with the euro, there wasn't a bailout; it was a bail-in. It was a bail-in that happened in Cyprus. Do you know the argument that being part of a bigger club is lazy? Lazy. If you look around the world, there are lots of small countries doing incredibly well because they're nimble, they're adaptable, they can often get in the middle of what big blocks are doing. They can be traders, they can be merchants. And so I think it's lazy. It's also, well, we're Cyprus, we're very small, so we'll just let big people run our country. That's not that. I just don't believe that's the right approach. I really don't believe that's the right approach. I think you can be small, you can be independent. The trouble is the European Union bully people. They bully people into joining. Even Switzerland, which is, bigger obviously than Cyprus, but very powerful. Even the Swiss tend to get bullied by the European institutions. There is an underlying unpleasantness about the whole thing. So look, I think it's been bad. I think Cyprus have missed opportunities. I think for Malta, it's been a disaster. I think Malta was in a very good position to be a big financial services, big clean financial services centre, and all of that's lost with EU membership. So, but look, ultimately it's a democratic choice. And if people in Cyprus are happy with it, then that's what they must have.
By the way, my goal here is not to have arguments against you or have a debate. My goal is to understand your opinion.
Yes.
Just to understand what your thoughts are about the topic. And a final thing on this topic. But UK left the European Union. But it seems that it's not going better.
That's true. I used to have a socialist friend of mine. He was very left-wing. And I'm more centre-right. And we both agreed we should leave the European Union. But we'd argue, after we'd left, what would we do? What policies would we put in place? And in a sort of quite lively discussion in the pub one night over a couple of drinks, we agreed that it was to win back the birthright to mismanage our own country. All right? The Conservative government in 2019 got a massive majority. I helped them, considerably helped them. They've done nothing. They've done nothing. They've done nothing with financial services legislation. Our fisheries industry is perhaps even more burdened than it was as EU members. Yeah, all we've done is to get back the ability to make our own decisions. Doesn't mean we'll make good decisions, and of course I'm disappointed. But at least we have the ability to change things as the years go on. And I think independence matters. I'll make one last point on this if I can, which gets forgotten. You go every week, every month to Strasbourg, Brussels, huge buildings, magnificent architecture, great lunch in the dining room, chauffeur-driven Mercedes. I mean, wow, you think this is power, real power. And you're treated like a god.
It's true.
Well, you know what it is. I mean, I always used to say that if you want to live a millionaire's lifestyle, become an MEP. Because, that's what it's like, Not the income, but the lifestyle. And you can go out if you want to, and the lobbyists will buy you dinner at the most expensive restaurants. So, if you want to live that way, you can. But it's an illusion. Europe is losing power very, very quickly. Europe is in economic decline. It's in social decline. There is a massive transference of power, influence and money from west to east that is going on in the world. And what Europe is doing to itself with its green policies, with welfareism, with its quite soft culture, it is diminishing. And, when we joined the common market, as we called it way back in the 70s, the European countries were about 30% of global GDP. It's now about 14 and falling every year. But think about this. This is an amazing statistic, and it includes you guys. It includes you guys, so think about this. In 2008, when I was first giving speeches about economics, and YouTube were picking it up, in 2008, the size of the American economy was almost exactly the same as the size of the Eurozone economy. All right? We're now just into 2025. The American economy is now double the size of the Eurozone. Think about that, double. And when you think about that number, you realize in relative terms, compared to America, compared to the Far East, compared to parts of South America, Europe is failing on every metric. And as I say, the buildings are great, the cars are great, the champagne's wonderful, but it's an illusion.
Okay. I'm very curious to understand, how do you think as a member of, give me advice, as a member of the European Parliament, how you can change things? What do you advise for one to do? Like, you had a party, right, with a lot of people, but like, for example, I'm an independent European. I didn't choose a party yet. So how you have influence in this?
Well, you've got an advantage, over most people that go to the Parliament, in that you had a presence, a big presence, before you even got there. I mean, you have to highlight. I'm telling you what to do. You haven't got to listen. But you're in a uniquely powerful position. There's no other MEP that's got the social media reach that you've got. All right? It's big. In fact, if you look at same here. Most government ministers here have no social media reach at all. They've never bothered. They've never understood in the way that you have, and to some extent I have, how powerful this is.
Not to some extent. You are doing a great job. I give thumbs up to social media.
Not bad for an oldie.
But the most amazing thing about you is your communication style. But we can talk about that later. Well, which is kind of what social media needs.
Yeah, good, simple, understandable, well thought through, but good, simple messages. So with humor, I find whenever people laugh, if people laugh, you're winning. If people laugh, you really are. So back to the question. If there is to be any chance of a reformed European Union, and I don't think there is, but I could be wrong. People have to understand the deficiencies that exist within it. What other parliament in the world operates like a travelling circus? Once a month, you load the important stuff in your office into a big trunk. It's then put on a lorry, driven 400 kilometres down the motorway to Strasbourg, where it's unpacked for 4 days, and then it goes back again. And it happens 12 times a year. Have you ever heard of such nonsense in the whole of your life? And I wonder, do people out there in Cyprus and elsewhere really understand the sheer stupidity of it? So there are little things like that you can, highlight as being a waste of taxpayers' money or whatever else it may be. But the fundamental issue, which we touched on earlier, is people think by voting for an MEP that they've got something genuinely democratic. Now, to be fair, the European Parliament has a lot more power now than it did before the treaties that went before. It does have a lot more power if it chooses to use it, which it rarely does.
In what way it chooses to use it? What do you mean?
Well, it could be much more assertive. The Parliament as a whole could be much more assertive. But you know what? You're part of this wonderful ecosystem. You're earning good money. You've got a great lifestyle. It's rocking the boat. Most human beings just don't do that. If they're comfortable and they think, well, I'm going to be here for 20 years or whatever, they generally don't rock the boat. And I'm unusual because I remember in the 99 intake, there were quite a lot of young Conservative MEPs from Britain who went in saying the same things as me. I'm going to, boom, boom, you know. And then by about 2002, it was all completely different. I remember one of them, I had an argument with her. I said, well, you've changed your tune. Oh, dear boy, I've become more pragmatic. I said, well, no, not really. You've just taken the shilling, you know. I didn't change my view one little bit in all the years I was there, but they tried. They worked on me. They worked on me very hard.
In what ways?
Oh, I was told how comfortable life could be. How comfortable life could be. Nothing overtly stupid did they do, but what a great life you could have, and amazing introductions you could have, and how much money you could make afterwards because you're from business, Nigel, and you know you can meet the biggest bosses in the world, and yeah. And I was also told that if I continued to fight the system, my life would become difficult, and it did.
In what way?
Oh, I think there were 6 investigations into me by Olaf, the anti-fraud unit. 6. All on anonymous tip-offs. So you're not allowed to know who's put a complaint in. You're accused of fraud. They leak it to the newspapers before they tell you. So the Sunday Times would ring me to say, oh, you're under investigation for fraud. Am I? And of course, when a story gets put out that way,
it's hard to.
Well, you're guilty.
Yeah, even if you say you are not guilty. You're
it's the classic. When did you stop beating your wife? Question. You know, and they made my life blooming difficult. After the Van Rompuy speech, after the "Who are you?" You know, you've got the charisma of a damp rag, and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. I received a tip-off the next week from somebody who worked, well, I can say it now, it's many years on. Yeah, it's safe to. I got a tip-off from somebody working in the cabinet of the European Parliament, or of Van Rompuy, actually, who said, be very, very careful. If you're out at night, never be alone anywhere. Preferably don't go downtown at all. Because if they're able to stop you late at night, you will have Class A drugs in your pocket. You will have Class A drugs in your pocket. And I wasn't sure, but I thought, okay, we'll stick, when we go for dinner or a drink, we'll stick around the Parliament or the Berlaymont. We won't go downtown. And it was funny because there was a European summit a few months afterwards with like 24-hour police and security protection. And I had to go into a building up near the big commission building to do an interview with an American network. And it was dinner time for the police shift that was off duty. And as I walked into the room with my press officer, about 300 police just turned around and stared at me. And I thought, I know why that is. They've all been given my photograph. So, you know, you've got to understand that behind this is big money. Real big money. You know, the big global corporations generally, maybe not big tech, but the rest of them, they love Brussels. They love Brussels. They love the European Union. Never before in their history have they been able to write the rule book for their own industries. And they do that with their influence at the European Commission. They do that not with commissioners, but with officials that work, nameless officials that work in different departments.
But they have a lot of power. There is a lot of people that the institution is running, half from the MEPs and half from the people that they've been working there since 20, 30 years. I think. I don't know if...
Yeah. And behind it all are the global corporates. I used to find in the UK that if you're a big company, you love the European Union. If you're a small and medium-sized company or entrepreneur, you hate the European Union. I mean, that's a bit too simplistic, but that's kind of how it breaks down. And, you know, I'd go even further and say that the European single market with all its rules actually is anti-competitive because it stops new innovation. It stops small firms getting into industries.
That's a fact.
Yeah. Because the barriers to entry in regulatory terms have become so high. So I think you can expose, if you choose, to an audience, A, the travelling circus, B, the influence of really big money. I mean, there are up to 15,000 lobbyists in Brussels. Think about that. And think about the fact that the only people that can write the legislation initially are the Commission. And you've no idea who these people's names even are. I used to like the fact there were 10,000 people in Brussels earning more than the British Prime Minister. 10,000! Who never get sacked. And no one works on Friday. And they've got the best pensions in the world. That's what I chose. I mean, they were the sort of things that I tried to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, just to say, I love the European Union, but there is a lot of problems. And I want to say the truth. So I need to, in a way, the truth sometimes sucks for everyone, and especially the European Union. So I will say the truth, and whatever I see, I will say, and I will try to be honest with. There is a lot of good things as well. Like,
tell me what?
People love the Erasmus program.
We don't need a European Union for that. We have student exchanges, no problem at all. We don't need bloody great big buildings in Brussels and tens of thousands of employees to have student exchange. Are you joking?
Also,
let's not have a fight over it, all right?
Yeah. It's interesting argument. We can go to the rabbit hole and question every...
And the reason I say that is because I meant what I said earlier. I do actually think Europe's fantastic. I love Europe. It's just what's been done in the name of Europe that I don't like.
Interesting. I have a big question for you.
Yeah.
Recently, Elon Musk said that you are not the right person to run Reform. What do you answer?
He'd been putting up, I've been met with him a couple of times. He's obviously a hero figure when it comes to free speech and when it comes to just dreaming, dreams that I don't think any of the rest of us are even capable of. I mean, did you see when that rocket came down and the arms came? I mean, it's unbelievable. So he's an amazing human being. He's been very supportive of me and Reform until a couple of weeks ago. It was an argument over a particular individual who portrays himself as a champion of free speech. He's currently in prison for contempt of court for the third time. Musk thinks he's a hero. I don't. I mean, I think some of the things he talks about are right. But look, because somebody thinks I should change my opinion doesn't mean that I will. So we have a disagreement over that. That was his response. Since then, he has been retweeting me again. So, I don't know. I don't see a long-term problem with that. I mean, Musk is a political radical. He genuinely is quite a big political radical.
What do you mean by radical, political radical?
Oh, I mean, he's out-trumping Trump. I think he is, and I mean, look, he thinks the Western world is going to hell. And he's right. It's exactly how I feel about it, So look, he made the comment he made, but I can't help it. If I believe something, if I have a certain set of principles, I just don't change them for anybody, not even Elon Musk.
Did you feel bad about this?
No.
Not instantly. You didn't care.
Do you know what? I've nearly died 3 times. Dramatic aeroplane crash, hit by a car on a main road, and cancer. I don't worry what people say. Nothing bothers me. No. Well, what? The welfare of my children or grandchildren and those close to me and my family, that worries me. They're things that I might lose sleep over at night. What people say about me, I couldn't care less.
So you are optimistic that you can work with Elon Musk in the future?
Well, I hope so. Yes, I do hope so. And as to how that relationship develops, we'll have to see. What is great news is that the X platform, now gives us an opportunity.
We love the X platform.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
We love it.
It's fantastic. And it gives us an opportunity to have genuine debate that for years...
It's amazing. It's
fantastic. That's why I call him a hero. Even if he says nice things about me or less nice things about me, he is a hero figure. And of that, I have no doubt at all. Absolutely none.
Can you tell me a bit of what are the steps that you took with Reform, and now you're coming into elections in a couple of months here in UK, and also you did some interesting, innovative things like you have a lot of 180,000 members, and they pay 25 euros membership, pounds.
Yeah,
pounds.
Yeah. We get the pounds. Hooray! You see, we're independent. We're free. You're slaves.
So, explain what is the plan and how do you think about the future?
So
this is something new for you. You've been in Brussels for your whole life.
I'll explain. So I started. It was really in the early 1990s. And I'd always been conservative. I'd supported the Thatcher reforms. Britain was in a bad way in the 70s. The left-wing trade unions had too much power. We were really in a bad way. Inflation approaching 30%. The whole thing was terrible. And the mood was bad. And Thatcher said, we're going to take some medicine. It's going to taste horrible. And it's going to be really painful. And it was. And it was very tough in the north and elsewhere with coal mines closing. Very, very tough for a lot of people, went through a lot of pain. But by the end of her time, suddenly the whole world wanted to come to London. We'd reduced taxation, we'd increased incentives, we'd broken down the old class divides. We've always been quite a class-conscious country, but suddenly it didn't matter where you went to school. Didn't matter what your accent was. If you worked hard, you could do very well. So that was where I came from, politically. In the early 90s, the Maastricht Treaty was negotiated, and that's what changed the EC into the EU and saw the open projection that a single currency was coming. That the mark would go, the franc would go, and there'd be the euro. And I just said no. I was a businessman. I'd worked for 20 years in the city of London, but doing business all over the world. A lot in Italy, funnily enough. Italy and America were my two biggest sources of work.
In what way? What you did?
So metals, copper, aluminium, lead, tin, zinc, and nickel.
You sell?
Buying and selling those commodities, yeah. Honestly, it was...
boring, but interesting.
Oh, it wasn't boring. You must be joking. It was fantastic. There was an exchange where people met and shouted at each other. It was huge fun. Oh, no, it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. It was really good fun. I loved it. Plus, I traveled all over America. I traveled over most of Europe, doing the job. But that's what I did. And so I started to get active in politics, very active in politics. I stood for a few elections during the 90s. And then in 99, I saw the opportunity with proportional representation, got to the European Parliament. In the end, I closed the business down. I had my own business. I closed it down in 2002. I found running my own business, employing staff.
Yeah, it's very hard to do at the same time. If you want to do good in the European Parliament, you need the...
It was tough, and I had young children, and it was just too much. So I did. In the end, we had the referendum in the end in 2016. I led UKIP to winning the Euro elections of 2014, which was a big highlight in my life. That was the first party in Britain since 1906 to win a national election that wasn't Labour or Conservative. It was a big moment. It's a really big moment. And then, of course, in 2019, I came back. We'd had the Brexit vote. I was still an MEP. I was a bit lower profile than I'd been. I then I then launched...
You achieved your goal. You didn't care.
Well, I thought we had. And then the buggers didn't do it. So then I formed the Brexit Party in 2019, and we won that election too. So I did win 2 European elections, which I'm quite proud of. Then in 2020, 31st of January 2020, we had a huge party in Parliament Square, 100,000 people, the countdown clock, boom. And Boris was in government. Boris was in government. They didn't want my help. So I thought, you know what? That's it. I'm done. The journey is over. From start to finish, 27 years of my life has gone. I've achieved something significant constitutionally. And so really my focus since then has been broadcasting, radio, television, doing a big daily TV show in the United Kingdom, plus social media, plus commuting back and forth across the Atlantic, because I've got good connections with Trump and the whole Trump team. And life was great. Life was great, and at the start...
What you were doing with the Trump team back then?
Oh, going and speaking in America at colleges and elsewhere, talking about globalism, talking about the way forward, talking about NATO, etc. And Trump may be America first, but obviously his emotional connection to the United Kingdom is very, very strong. His mother was Scottish. And so always talking about cooperations, how the countries could work together better. And in particular, how we could live in a more peaceful world. And I think whether you like Trump or not, and, I completely understand that his New Yorker style is not everyone's taste. But in his 4 years as president, he did a lot to broker world peace. The Abraham Accords in the Middle East, crossing over the line with Little Rocket Man into North Korea. So I was doing all those things. And then at the dawn of...
So you were discussing with Trump a lot of stuff. This is what...
well, not necessarily him, sometimes him, but I mean the people around him, and those common interests. There is a sort of... With the East Coast, particularly with the East Coast of America and the UK, the cultures are so similar.
Yes.
Music, film, so similar in so many ways. I mean, NFL now comes to London and we pack Wembley Stadium, and soccer's taking off in America. So culturally, I think Britain and America culturally now are closer than we've ever been in history. I genuinely do. I really, really do. So all was good with life, really. Earning good money, not much pressure. And at the dawn of 2024, going into my 60th birthday, a couple of grandkids on the way. I was still working, but I then just thought, you know what? They've messed up Brexit. The two parties are virtually a uni party. None of them believe in it. None of them believe in individual liberty and freedom. The state gets bigger and bigger. Taxes get higher. Our population explodes because of open borders, which has had a massively detrimental effect on people's ability to access public services, housing. I mean, our population's risen by 10 million in 20 years. Economically, none of them get or understand that it's men and women setting up their own businesses, taking risks. That's what really pushes an economy. And so I said, that's it, I'm back. So I came back into...
One of the reasons that you came back is because you led Brexit and then they screwed it.
Yeah.
And you look bad also because maybe you led the country to a wrong decision.
No,
you had some
I don't
weight on your shoulders, something like this.
No, I don't worry about things like that. As I said to you earlier, I really don't worry about things. But frustrated, yes, that we could have done so much better than we've done. There's no point leaving the single market and keeping all the single market rules. That puts you backwards, not forwards. If you change things in life, you have to make adjustments. And we just haven't done it. Now, they say it's because of the pandemic, but they didn't really have the will to do it. So no, I threw myself back into it. And it was difficult because, they called a snap general election. And I literally came back and there were 4 weeks and 3 days to go. It wasn't very long. I had a realistic objective, which was to win millions of votes and to win some seats in Parliament. Now, we got about 4.2 million votes. If the system was proportional...
14% of the vote.
Yeah, 14. Yeah,
But it's fucking crazy. I was researching before coming. Other parties with less votes than you have more seats in the parliament.
I know.
It's interesting.
Well, you could call it that. Fluid out. It drives me mad. Drives me potty. It's difficult. The system is difficult. I mean, had we had a proportional system, that would have been 100 seats.
Yeah.
As it is, we got 5. But it kind of didn't matter because it was the first step. It was the breakthrough. And since the election, I promise you, I've never worked hours like this in my life. I mean, these are proper 18-hour days. It's ridiculous. I mean, if I don't kill myself, we could do quite well. We are building a national political party. We're building structure around the country. We are... How? People join, they pay their 25 quid. We then write to them and say, come to a meeting in this town hall or this pub or whatever it is. You're a local member in the area, come along. Right, we need one of you to put your hands up and be the local chairman. We appeal for candidates. The candidates come in and we are now vetting those candidaats. The handicap we had in the general election is we had some extremists standing for us, did us enormous harm. And I've absolutely vowed.
I saw a team outside doing quality control on the people.
Yeah. Well, in fact, we've had 2,000 people apply to be candidates in the last week. And yes, we're doing...
2,000?
In the last week, 2,000 people have come forward. So I want no truck. I want no truck with the extreme racist elements that exist within policy. And, both sides have extremes, and we know that. A
lot of people think that you are racist as well.
Well, that's just...
Yesterday, I was in a taxi and I was saying, what do you think about Nigel Farage? He said, I hate him, he's racist.
Well, with respect, that's a moronic comment. It's just a moronic comment, isn't it? I mean, it's like in football. Do you go for the ball or the man? And if you say that someone's racist, all you're doing is just kicking his legs and not going for the ball. And just bad, baseless arguments. Just bad arguments. Ridiculous arguments.
Anyway, it was fun. You can continue.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, not everyone in politics, not everyone likes you. And that's fine. So we are vetting candidates. There's a big series of elections on May the 1st this year, although half of them have been cancelled. In the areas of the country where we're strongest, we learned on Friday that because of restructuring, they're going to be delayed for a year or 2 years. The establishment are terrified of us. Absolutely terrified of us. This cosy club that has existed for 100 years between Labour and Conservative, they're very, very worried. So we're professionalising the party. We're building the party. We've had a massive uptick in membership. We've gone through 180,000 members, which makes us much bigger than the Conservative Party.
How much? How many members?
They're about 130 or so. Labour, I think, are in the low 300s. So they're still bigger.
But with the rate that you are growing.
Yeah, well, if it continues, yeah. I mean, I think it will. I think the remarkable thing about our people is this. They all recognise, all of our supporters recognise the country's in trouble.
Yeah, there is a wave of change.
But when you come to our events, they're like rock concerts. They're happy, they're smiling, they're cheering, they're optimistic that we can turn this round. And you know what? History shows us is you can turn things round. You get the new captain of a sports team, and suddenly or a new manager of a club, and suddenly the performance can change completely.
Yeah, just because placebo.
Well,
or placebo or something.
Yeah, but it's human beings. We all, whether we like to admit it to ourselves or not, we all respond to leadership. In whatever situation we're in, if we see someone there that we have some respect for and we support, and they show us a way forward, we feel good about that. It's very, very natural. We've been doing it for a long time, many, many thousands of years,
So explain me. So now you are trying to make the party across the country.
Yes.
And have representation in all the constituencies.
Absolutely.
And that will lead up. This will be the elections, but will lead up, and after 5 years, the big elections.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
this is the goal here.
Yeah. We've got, as I say,
Is it possible to win and be president? Nigel Farage to be the next president of UK?
So we have the local elections this year, half of them. Next year, we've got the Scottish and Welsh elections, in which Wales we're doing incredibly well. Incredibly well. I mean, better than I could have even dreamt of. Can we win the 2029 general election? Well, if you look at the history books, the answer is no. It's impossible. Completely impossible. Just like Nigel will never leave the European Union. Stop wasting your time. Stop wasting your life. Get back to business. Get back to the family. We left the European Union. Surprising things happen. If ever there was a moment for a really dramatic change, then it's now. And whether we win or not, do you know what? It depends how good we are. Depends how good we are. If we're able to structure properly, if we're able to bring the credible policies that we need, if we're able to raise the tens and tens of millions that we will need to do this. If we get all those things right, we have a real chance. We have a real chance.
For you to be the president?
Well, I am the leader of the party and the founder of the party and the driving force of the party. But what I would say is this. I'm probably a bit less of an egomaniac than people think. If somebody younger and better than me comes along, that is more fit to do the job, do you know what? I'll be the kingmaker and not the king. If I really see that person that I think can reach the British public in a big enough way, that has the communication skills that you need, that has the courage not to get pushed around, if that person comes along, great. But until they do, yes, it'll be me.
Interesting. So now your goal for the next 4 or 5 years to go speak across UK, make a lot of alliances, find the right people to run, find the right representatives. So it's like building something from scratch.
Yes, and I'm very fortunate that I've found a very talented person to help me. Zia Yusuf, whose family came here from Sri Lanka, who are Muslim. I mean, tell your taxi driver that, But Zia is 38. He built his own tech business from scratch, sold it for a lot of money. He's done very, very well. He's now dedicating his life to this. And to have somebody as my chairman with his ability and drive and commitment is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Because I can't do this on my own. There's a limit to what I can do. I need to have very, very good people around me and very dedicated people around me.
Now the team I understood is 20, 30 people, the hardcore team.
Yes.
But probably need a lot more people.
Oh, it's minute. I mean, it's compared to big political parties. But, and by the way, I don't want a massive team. I think a small team of mission-led, dedicated people achieve far more in life than a massive office with hundreds of people.
Yeah, we saw some things with Twitter as well. Twitter with 10,000 employees is functioning better with 2,000 employees.
That's right.
So a lot of the times...
Yeah, and there's a big lesson there for all of us, There's a big lesson. I mean, the size of the bureaucratic state in this country is just ridiculous. And it's the same in every European country, despite the fact we've got tens of thousands more in Brussels as well. And this is where this will be the acid test of Musk in politics. If this Doge department properly gets off the ground, if Musk is able to do to the administrative state what he did to X, it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. It will be
Really
a
exciting.
playbook for everyone.
Absolutely.
So they need to not screw this up, because they will inspire a lot of change across the world. Because
Good change.
Yeah, good change.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about Andrew Tate making a Brav party and wanted to become prime minister?
I wouldn't take it too seriously. I really wouldn't. The Tates are interesting because, you know, much as they're hated by mainstream media, I made a comment last year. I said, whether you love them or hate them, the Tate brothers are an important influence on young British men more than women, obviously, which was taken by Sky News and mainstream media. Oh, you support the Tate brothers? No. I said they have a very important influence. And you get this moronic, oh, that means you support them. You support their bad statements, blah, 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 blah. To which I said, no, you're absolutely right. The Tates have no influence at all. You happy? That's how I deal with it. But yeah, they have reached young men who are encouraged not to be young men. So we had the European football, sorry I mentioned football again, but the European Football Cup finals in Germany this year. And lots of young English blokes are going out to the football to be told that they mustn't drink more than like one beer. They mustn't chant songs. I mean, we're trying to feminize men. It's crazy. It's crazy. Rather than using that built-up testosterone in men in a positive way, we're telling them, don't be like that. Yes, all right, 2 million years of evolution's made you like that, but please change. It's ridiculous. And that's what the Tates feed into. Now, it doesn't mean I support what they say on many things at all. And is there an air of male dominance and misogyny? Yes, I think there probably is. But it's interesting. Now, the idea that they're going to run a party living in Romania, I mean...
You don't think they're going to succeed? No.
This is much harder than people realise. There have been hundreds of people since 1945 have set up political parties in Britain that have fallen into nothing. I'm probably one of the very, very few, maybe the 2 or 3 people in the last 80 years that have managed to set something up and have any level of success. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Interesting. How do you think about your policies in general? Like, you have a lot of experience, but how do you choose, okay, this is the right policy? It's just what's the right thing to do. Also, this will sell also. This will capture people's imagination.
Yeah.
And how do you think about policies?
I think the important thing is always to go from first principles. And I think one of the mistakes that Westminster makes is, what did the focus group say yesterday? Oh, we'll say that then. And that's called followership.
This is what Kamala Harris did as well.
Yeah, it's followership. It's not leadership. Leadership is saying, you know what? I think there's a problem here. Here's how we need to solve it. And you say it to the country. And initially, people are going, really? But you explain the argument you're making. You repeat it over a period of months. And hopefully, people come with you. It's like being on a journey. And that's what political leadership is. It's not easy. Most people, there's a turmoil within everybody of how much of you is a warrior and how much of you is a coward. All right? Now, extreme warriors get killed very quickly. And extreme cowards never achieve anything in life. And it's all about where the balance is between those two. But I think that much of our leadership over the last quarter of a century...
So a lot of the times you don't get the crazier policy that you think. You were trying to polish it so it sounds sane sometimes.
Well, you're trying to bring people with you on a journey, and so you have to be ahead of public opinion. But that's difficult because you're standing up in front of the country saying something that most people don't agree with or haven't thought about. It's not easy to do this. But if I've got, there are lots of things in life I'm really bad at. I'm bad at most things. But if there's one thing I think I can do, it's to articulate an argument for change.
I think you are the best member of the European Parliament, articulate things that ever passed from the Parliament.
They miss me. They miss me. You'd have had lots of fun with me. We could have disagreed very volubly inside the Parliament. And by the way, that's the nice thing about talking to you on this format you've got, is that you disagree with me and I disagree with you, but we do it as mature adults.
Yeah, it's fun.
But also respecting the right of the other person to have a different point of view. And that's what's so hateful about cancel culture, about so many of the things that have gone wrong over the last few years. And it's why the Trump victory is so significant.
Now, back to the point, you are sitting in a room with other people and you're saying this should be here, this should be in the plan, this should be...
So first principles, what are we here for? Family, community, country. That's the slogan that I've adopted on coming back into politics. And number one, we have to protect the integrity of the nation. That means protecting its borders.
So basically you are having these three things and then you are building up policies from the ground up. This is kind of...
Yeah, what is good for family, what is good for community, what is good for country. Values. It's a values-based approach. Not in an old-fashioned way. I'm not harking back to the 17th century or anything like that, but it is a values-based approach. And it does say, by the way, that the Judeo-Christian culture is what the entirety of our rule book, of our nation, of Western civilization is about. And perhaps we ought to respect it a little bit more than we do, and defend it a little bit more than we do. That clearly defense is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. You mentioned yourself earlier on all of the problems that are existing in the world. A nation with strong defenses, along with its allies with strong defenses, is less likely to see war. It's like paying an insurance policy, effectively, and we need to do more on that.
Because people are afraid of you.
Yes.
Countries are afraid of you.
Yeah, well, that's, it's like in the playground at school. If you think...
You don't go and beat the biggest guy in the block.
Not unless you're very stupid. We believe in borders. The rates of immigration into Britain have been completely unacceptable. And by the way, huge numbers of the migrant communities agree. Huge numbers. We had more black and ethnic minority voters voted Reform at the last election than voted for the Liberal Democrats. All right? So we're cutting through, this negative nonsense that gets talked by the odd taxi driver. We are cutting through all of that. Economically, well, what we are doing as a country in the name of combating global warming, net zero, is making us poor.
In Europe as well. It's making everyone.
Yeah.
The fast transition to that is making everyone poor.
Yeah, and we are the most dependent for energy on wind and solar of any European country by miles. And what it means is, number one, we're the most vulnerable. There was a moment last Wednesday with the cold weather when the lights nearly went out. Can you imagine? No lights in London. It's incredible. And we need electricity more today because of,
electricity is the biggest commodity that we need increasingly in the future because of AI, because of...
Yeah, everything.
So it's very important.
Everything. And we were last Wednesday, are the lights going to stay on? So the more we invest in wind energy, the higher our prices are, the less our reliability is. And so our argument is this. We understand those who are concerned about the environment. Of course we do. But if we're going to use coal, small amounts, but oil and gas particularly, until 2050, and even the climate change lobby accept we will be using some oil and gas until 2050, why not, here's an idea, Why not produce our own? Rather than importing it from other parts of the world. Steel, a very important commodity, and links back to the defense argument I made with you a few minutes ago.
So you are having these Trump ideas of let's drill, baby, drill, and do everything inside.
Yeah. I mean, steel. We're on the verge of ceasing to be a primary steel producer. Our steel plants close. The production goes to India. The steel is produced there on lower environmental standards than here. And then the product gets shipped back halfway around the world. I mean, we're not cutting carbon emissions. We're increasing carbon emissions, but we're doing it there as opposed to here. So these are the real stupidities. And the toughest legislation around this was introduced by the Conservatives. It is now supported by Labour. They are the UKIP Party. We can reduce people's household bills. We can make people's electricity bills much cheaper. We can get competitive energy for manufacturing and for business. So these are some of the areas, that we're going to fight on and campaign on.
So in the European Parliament and now, there was like a cordon sanitaire. I don't know if it still existed back then when you were.
Yeah.
Like they were cancelling the far right and they are calling... Also, they call you populist,
yes.
And all this stuff. How do you navigate the politics with these two labels, far right, and now they're doing it also to AFD with Elon Musk support and all this stuff. How do you navigate into this world of labeling something as far right and you calling you populist?
So the second to last speech I gave as an MEP, it was in Brussels, in the Parliament of Brussels, and I said, isn't it funny? Populism is becoming popular, which they couldn't stand. Barroso first called me populist when he was president of the European Commission. They designed populist to be a pejorative term, to be a negative term. I'm very happy with it. Perfectly happy with being called populist. They struggled with me. They couldn't call me far right. They couldn't put me in the far right because I'm not. However hard they tried, they could not categorize me of that. So I was the populist and the rest were the extreme right as they saw it. Look, on both sides of politics, there are extremes. And there are some of the right-wing parties in Europe who say and want to do things that I wouldn't advocate at all. And if you look at the groups that I sat in the European Parliament, I was pretty cautious about who I sat with. I never wanted UKIP, or now the Brexit Party, now Reform. I never wanted it to be a far-right party, and we're not. In that sense. AFD, well, I've got friends in the AFD, but I've also got some concerns about one or two of its representatives and what they say. So these are fine lines. They're fine lines. But what is for certain is that the centre of gravity of debate is moving to the right, quite considerably. Take Georgia Meloni.
We saw it with the elections recently. The European elections, they elected more right-wing.
Yes. No, there is a shift going on. I think Georgia Meloni is a big component of that. Meloni becomes Italian prime minister. Oh my God, Mussolini's back. This is terrible. But that's what was being said. That's what's being said. And what's she done? She's actually brought governing stability to Italy, the most unstable of all European or EU countries, in the last few decades. Excuse me. She's brought stability, and she's shifted the centre of gravity of debates back in a rightward direction. I tell you a funny thing. Things that you could have said in 2010 that would have been mainstream, just right of centre views, have in the last couple of years been labelled far right and extremist. That's how far to the left argument shifted on a whole number of things. And that pendulum went miles too far that way. And I think overall, it's now swinging back to a more common sense position.
But my opinion is I think the medias are kind of a bit leftish, and they are considering this as far right, because far right depends where you stand. If you are on the left, it's relative.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, you're fake news. You're fake news. I mean, Trump called them all out repeatedly. Yeah, the media. It's funny, isn't it? We touched on this earlier, but it is the fundamental difference between the metropolitan areas and the areas outside the capital cities. Nearly every country is divided in that way. Whether it's Dublin, London, Paris, what is thought to be fashionable and acceptable and decent in the cities, it's very different once you go outside.
Well, I'm okay with them calling them far right and all this stuff, but they are not cooperative. They are not talking to each other. I'm against this. In a democracy, you need to hear the other argument. You don't need to cancel.
Oh, the cordon sanitaire is disgusting.
Yeah,
because
it is.
because actually you're insulting their voters.
Yeah.
It's not them you're insulting; it's their voters that you're insulting. And these are terrible mistakes to make. If they go on, if the EU authorities and senior figures in the groups in the European Parliament, if they go on pursuing this sort of doctrine, they will only make them stronger.
Yes.
That's the point. But I'm afraid they're so blinded with their moral superiority.
Moral superiority.
Oh yes,
that's fine.
Oh yes, this is actually important.
Yeah, I agree.
I said to you that you and I can sit here and we can disagree, right? We can disagree fundamentally, but I genuinely respect your right to be pro-European, and I hope you respect the fact that I have arguments against. All right, and we can, we can shout at each other. That's fine. That's fine. But who knows? Maybe even go for a beer afterwards. All right? Because that's what grown-up human beings should do. What has happened is the left, as they've seized the debate with mainstream media, as they've seized the debate within schools, universities, and academia, many of them actually believe that they are better human beings than those on the conservative right. That is where their moral superiority comes from. And that is what arms them with doing things that we previously would not have thought as being acceptable, but because right is on their side, good is on their side, and the other lot over there are bad. And we on the right side look at the left and think they're a bit nutty.
And you see it all over their policies, the European Union, that we are the good ones, we have the best morals, and everyone else. We're trying to influence countries like Russia is trying to influence countries like a lot of other countries, but we do it the right way, and everyone else is doing
moral superiority.
Moral superiority. I think what you said is interesting.
There's no question. And if you believe as a human being that you are a better human being than people with a different point of view, if you draw that out logically to where it might go, it's very scary.
I don't know that about the elections in Romania. I don't know the facts exactly. Maybe what they said is true, but in one case, it's like you can cancel every other opinion. Like, and you can because you are the right moral guy. It's difficult in the elections to cancel whole different elections.
Democracy can be very inconvenient if it gets the wrong result.
Yeah, because we are the good ones and we know.
I mean, people that voted Brexit were painted out after the result by the establishment to be knuckle-dragging racists. It was disgusting. You didn't know what you voted for, you little peasant. We're better than you. We're telling you vote again. It summed the whole thing up.
Can you give me some advice to the general public as one of the best communicators, politician in the world? Like, how do you communicate and how one politician should structure his everything, his ideas, his speeches, and basic communication skills, advice?
When I grew up, a few decades ago, and going back forever, people would get up and give speeches. The family would gather for a christening. or it'd be someone's birthday. And somebody, the senior figure in the household or the family, would get up, say a few words, some nice words, some jokey words, and propose a toast. Getting up to speak was just something that you did. It came with responsibility. People often used to play more games. Kids would sing songs or play charades or play a musical instrument, or we were much more expressive a few years ago than we are today. Now public speaking terrifies people. I mean, literally terrifies people. The number of people that have said to me, Nigel, oh my God, it's my daughter's wedding next Saturday. Well, I mean, how am I going to, I mean, I can't speak, I can't, terrible state people get into. I mean, shocking state they get into. We've lost the art of speaking. We've lost the art of communicating. I mean, kids don't even talk to each other anymore on the phone. They DM. We've lost the ability to talk. We're inexperienced. So I always say to people, say it is your daughter's wedding, or you're the best man. A mate's getting married, you're the best man, or whatever it is. You've got to get up and speak. And I always say to people, at these events, remember that everybody in the room is on your side. Now, it wasn't always like that for me in the European Parliament. But boo, boo. I used to love it. Good. Remember when you get up to do this that people are on your side. The second thing I tell everybody is the art of communication is not to read. Thank you very much indeed. I want to thank Sandra. Disastrous. Disastrous. If you write it down word for word, it is catastrophic. Now, what you can do is have a little aid memoir. And what does a speech need? What does an interview need? It's actually very simple. Beginning, middle, and end. It's like every story. Beginning, middle, and end. I gave a speech on Saturday. I gave a speech on Friday to conferences of the party around the country. I have no autocue. I have zero notes. I sometimes on my lectern will place, say it's a statistical fact about the area that I'm, I might use that. The art of communication is where your chin and where your eyes are. So if I'm speaking to you, I'm talking to you. You're sitting in an audience or whatever it is. And if I'm like that, we're not engaging. There is no human engagement. But if I'm looking at you and looking at a room and talking, then you're listening. And I'm actually interacting with you on a human level. And even if I mess up a few of the words, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you can see that I'm being sincere. So that's the classic mistake of communication, is to be over-scripted, is to look down, not up. I'm sure in the European Parliament they will, and to have two or three very simple things to say. So that's in the context of a wedding or whatever it may be. Politically, you could only do those things if you believe in what you're saying. If you're a career politician and you're doing it because you thought at Oxford University it would be a good thing to do with the rest of your life, it's very difficult to be a good communicator because you're not driven. Whereas I've always been in this. Look, I could have been a very rich man. If I'd never got into the European Parliament, I could have been a very, very rich man. But I chose to do this. And I chose it because I wanted to do it. And I chose it because I believed in things. And I think that when I speak and when I appear, wherever it is, whether you agree with what I say or fundamentally disagree with what I say, I think people can see that I actually believe it. So you have to believe in something and learn that basic skill. Chin up, address the audience. That's the advice that I would give. There's nothing very scientific about it, but it's about the way humans interact.
So don't be too scripted. just speak from your heart.
Yes.
Have beginning, middle, end kind of a story to say.
And by all means,
this is the beginning. Like, I'm going to tell you about this, then explain this, and this is the end.
And never begin with an apology. Never, never, never. Oh my goodness me, it's terrible. So the chap gets up to speak and says, I'm not a very good public speaker. All right, I won't bother them. Never begin with an apology. Ever. Begin with something, boom. Start with something. Even if it's hello everybody, or whatever it is. You've got to have a positive start. I've watched this. I've watched people saying, I'm not a very good speaker, if you'd excuse me. And there was no point, everyone's chatting to each other. Strong start matters.
It's very hard to get the attention of the parliament.
The parliament?
Yeah.
I didn't find that.
No, because everyone is the translation is there's a lot of
also
when you speak in the parliament, it's very hard for everyone to listen.
Yeah,
it's very hard.
It is. Yeah, and also, I mean, frankly,
because most of the times that people speak, people don't understand what they're saying. So,
and I mean, yeah, the European Parliament works if you're a group leader. If you're a group leader and generally down towards the front, then I think it works because you've got the big guys there. You know, von der Leyen's there, a visiting head of state's there, whatever. If you're speaking in a normal debate in the European Parliament, it's very hard. Quite frustrating, actually. Quite frustrating.
So the only way to be influential is to be a party leader in the European Parliament?
Not the only way. No, you can be a committee chair. There are other things you can do. But in terms of...
It helps a lot.
In terms of the impact of a speech in the European Parliament, yeah, it makes a massive difference.
Because you have more time, also you have...
You have an audience. You have an audience. You know, in my case, you know, Mr. Juncker would have spoken.
And you can talk to... This is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can talk to big events, to von der Leyen immediately.
And of course, I was seat number 20. And von der Leyen and Barroso before him were seat number 21. I was right next to them. I was in the middle of it. I was in the middle of the Euro fanatics and me. You know, I mean, you couldn't have scripted it better. I was very fortunate.
Do you miss anything?
Yes, of course. I miss the theatre.
You miss the theatre?
Yeah, I used to, once a month, the big debate would be in Strasbourg. That was the debate with the Commission President. That was the debate often with the President of the Council. That was the big moment. That's when the Parliament was packed. 9 o'clock start. You know, and I would always deliberately get there as late as I possibly could. So as I arrived, the Parliament was full. I'd walk down, you know, and then sort of murmuring over, Christ, what's he going to do today? Or whatever it was. And then I'd go down and I always shake Juncker's hand and say good morning. And so I'd make quite a thing of it. And you sit there and listen. You get your turn to speak. And even after all those years, I was nervous or thoughtful about what I was going to say, what I was going to do.
Even after 20 years?
Of course. If you want, do you know something? And this again gets back to public speaking. If you want to do something well, a few butterflies are normal. They're normal. How do you think of baseball?
So even Nigel Farage has butterflies before he starts to speak.
Not lots, but of course you want to do well. You want to do your best. Of course, it's right and natural. You ask any top sports player, whatever sport, baseball, cricket, football, whatever it is, when they go out for a big final or a big event, do they have a few nerves? Every one of them does, every single time. It's quite normal. So I miss that big theatre once a month. It's more difficult in the House of Commons because I've got 5 MPs. If I had 100 MPs, I'd get that every week, not every month, but I don't. I'm making the most of the opportunities that I get there, but it's much more difficult for me sitting back, you know, and not being directly a part of the big debates, or most of them anyway. So I miss that. I miss Strasbourg itself. It's a very beautiful city. It's not a very big city, but it's a very beautiful city. And it's the kind of place where you can find a restaurant run by a husband and wife with a daughter or son working for them, and where the choice of main course is 3 dishes, and it's written in chalk on a board because it's what's in season. All of those things I thoroughly enjoyed. Thoroughly enjoyed all of those things. Yeah, I did. No question about it. I didn't want to be there, but I enjoyed it while I was.
Now you're happy with what you're doing? Or
Yeah.
you said that you're working so...
Yeah, I mean, the hours are too long. I'm literally bombarded, you know, and I'm literally bombarded, you know. I mean, I'm sort of starting work at 5 every morning and finishing at 11 at night.
But you're happy with doing all these things?
I'm driven.
You're driven?
Yeah.
Happiness doesn't matter. It's not a thing in your life.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it. Of course I'm enjoying it. It's blooming. I mean, you know, I've got to be sensible. I'm 60. You know, I mean, considering all my body's been through, I'm not in a bad way. I haven't had a drink yet this year. That's progress. Look, I'm enjoying it. We're making waves. We're making progress. I'm enjoying it. It's tough. It's really tough, but I'm enjoying it, yeah.
I have another 2 last questions. First question, how did you find our conversation?
Very good. Do you know why? I think on those big questions, those big fundamental questions about democracy, about the supremacy the left feel over the right, about the way the European institutions work, I think you listened. So I did enjoy that. And you're a very civilized man. That matters too.
And the last question, I always ask this in the end. After 30 seconds, you are going to die. What do you want your last words to be in this planet?
I did my best. I tried hard. If I upset people along the way, I don't care.
Thank you for listening, guys. We love you. Peace.
Thank you very much.